Welcome back to We Do B2B. We have a slightly different format for the show today where your regular host, yours truly, is actually going to be turned around and interviewed as the guest. So the tables are turned and we're asking our brand lead and our creative lead, Shannon Bayliss, to help me unpick a discussion and a debate around differentiation and distinctiveness. And you'll notice that I didn't say versus, and there's a reason why, which we'll get into. So Shannon, take us away as the host of the show today.
Well, thank you for having me, Dale. It's nice to have you here to pick your brain. So we're talking about not differentiation versus distinctiveness, which we'll get into, which is an interesting distinction and difference. So what has happened in the last week that makes this topic relevant to marketers?
Okay. There are some big names in the marketing theory world. Mark Ritson being one of them, Byron being another. Famously, they've been positioned against each other as antagonist, protagonist, antagonist. They've always kind of had that, I suppose, sparring partner relationship in the public view. Ritson published a webinar last week, I want to say, called Defending Differentiation. And really it's picking up on this groundswell of opinion and research around the distinctiveness pool, which says this is rhetoric, this is what you must do. And it actually throws out a lot of the conventional wisdom that the discipline of marketing was built upon. So I don't know if we call it differentiation gate or what we call it, but there's been this moment in time whereby Ritson, who famously outspoken, famously unafraid of dropping the F-bomb as and when he needs to, has come out and said, this is all crazy, right? Let's not have this discussion which is this or that. It's always going to be a case of bothism. You must do this, you must consider that. It's two halves of the coin, and in that process he's kind of pulled a lot of their, what should we say, the Ehrenberg-Bass way of thinking and communicating apart a little bit. And if you've been following it on social media, the whole thing's gone, it's like watching a soap opera between two marketing thinkers, which is great. It's great fun. So we wanted to kind of hop on that topic and actually look at it from a business to business perspective here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Okay. Really just to focus on, how far the dial should swing each way. With a view of getting to a point in this conversation where hopefully we're giving some advice and we're shedding some light on how this debate, for want of a better word, plays out in the business-to-business context here in New Zealand.
Okay, thank you for that, Dale. So let's get into definitions, just to bring our audience up to speed on what is distinctiveness and what is differentiation, and how might you separate the two.
One of the chapters in the Ehrenberg-Bass Institute and Byron Sharp's book, How Brands Grow, on differentiation, starts with the phrase, rather than striving for meaningful perceived differentiation, marketers should seek meaningless distinctiveness. Branding lasts and differentiation doesn't. Reading off the sheet there. They're two different schools of thought. So differentiation is, it's a very well-established field of thinking within marketing, based off of some of the old tenets of unique selling proposition, unique value proposition. It went all the way to phrases like differentiate or die, right, with really the founding principle being that your brand or your business should take a stance where you have something meaningfully different in what you stand for, what you deliver, in order to open up markets and grow. It went too far in some instances to say that you must be completely unique and you must own something that nobody else can touch.
You know, I remember hearing, I remember the feeling when I heard about the unique selling proposition for the first time, and I thought, oh, that's good, yeah, let's be unique in whatever we're doing here. And then after a while, it just felt like an enormous amount of pressure, and realizing, oh, there almost isn't anything solely unique about a business that would be completely and utterly different from another.
And ownable over time.
And ownable, and that's the other element to the differentiation piece that might have been overstated in the past, is that you should own the differences that that you want to go after.
Differentiation then it's based on a triad. So it's about understanding what matters to the customer, what your business, what your competencies are that you're really, really good at, that you stand for, that's different, and then what the competition can't replicate. So it kind of deals with this marriage of three. Whereas distinctiveness it's much more about, it's actually a very simplistic concept. Yeah. It's basically saying, always look like yourself, always be associated with a specific buying situation, and if you do those things right, growth will happen. So I have an example of distinctiveness. I brought a little prop with me. So for those of you listening, you're going to miss out. For those of you watching,
just a note from producer Louis here. Dale has just put on a bright red lobster hat.
Meaningless distinctiveness says that if I run an agency, and let's call it the
red lobster?
The crusty agents.
The crusty agents.
The crusty agents. We're a crust agency. If I advertise long enough and all of my content features people wearing this particular lobster hat, at a point in time, so long as I'm associated with, if you need a campaign, call the crusty agents, I will win. I will grow. Now, I don't know. Maybe that plays out well in business to consumer. Maybe it makes sense, but distinctiveness has such a fantastic and massive role to play in opening the door. But I believe that there are bigger D's to consider in the world of business to business, and those would be due and diligence.
Okay, so due diligence.
Yeah.
Unpack that a little bit for us. What do you mean by due diligence?
Okay, in a business to consumer environment, you're accountable to yourself, right? Let's say, for example, I want to go and buy cereal. If I buy cereal, I'm going through the supermarket, it's in the same space as it always is, it looks like it always does, hence my buying pattern goes, oh cool, recognize that, know that, stick it in the basket. Okay. Shift gears to business, particularly in some of the more traditional spaces. There is the mindset of due diligence, which is if you're going to spend the company's money, you'd better have worked out that you're buying the right thing, right? That's where the mindset of the 3 quotes comes from. Like, get 3 quotes, go to market, right. Get 3 quotes, right? Yeah. So there's argumentation and there's logic and there's evidence that says if you are the first to mind in that buying group, that's the distinctiveness piece. If you've got that recall piece that says when I need, for example, a CRM, I think of HubSpot and Salesforce, of course you're already through the door. But if we come back to the concept of distinctiveness, for example, me wearing a lobster hat as an agency, that's not very easy to sell across the boardroom table. Distinctiveness as a school of thought is based upon like absolute reach. Reach all of the category, reach all of the buying group with the same consistent message, tie it to a category entry point if you can, so that all of those people know that when they need to call the Ghostbusters, they should call you. But I don't know how realistic that is in a lot of markets.
Right.
Particularly here in New Zealand, right? Let's take, for example, let's take the small and medium enterprise space, right? There aren't, you could probably count on 2 hands in New Zealand how many businesses have the advertising budget to reach the entire market. I mean, even if they're going overseas, that whole thing gets a lot more complicated. So distinctiveness has a role to play in opening the door, but I would argue that differentiation, i.e. actually having some level of meaningful difference, whether it's being more X or less Y, that's a lot easier to sell across the boardroom table than, hey, we should choose these guys because they're always orange.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. So something that I'm picking up on here and what you're saying is that distinctiveness might get you in through the door to be in that first consideration set among a bunch of different, like you mentioned Salesforce and HubSpot. But the differences between Salesforce and HubSpot will be the thing that gets you across the line in terms of getting a purchase, making the sale. 100%. Yeah.
I mean, inherently there are platform differences if you look at the 2 of them, but HubSpot has positioned itself, in my mind, around being agile, around easy to implement, ideal for small to medium business. That's a tangible point of difference. It is easier to implement than Salesforce.
Right.
It shares knowledge more freely, so it's easier to learn than Salesforce.
Yeah.
You compare HubSpot at the opposite end of the spectrum with like Dynamics 365, where you need a friggin' code wizard to be able to actually plug the thing in. Don't get me wrong, it's a great CRM, but there is a relative position that HubSpot has taken in that context, which is we're easier.
Yeah.
You can have us live tomorrow and working, and you're going to be gathering data and information, and you'll be that.
Right.
When it comes to selling that across the boardroom table, to, whether that's to sales, to customer service, to marketing, that's a much easier message than their logo's orange with 3 spokes that poke out of it, and we should use them because of that.
Yeah.
So while there is, this don't get me wrong, huge body of evidence from the Ehrenberg Bass Institute, and I'm not a data scientist. I can't question their methodologies. I can't pull that stuff apart. But I do question whether absolute distinctiveness as a strategy is a privilege of the rich.
Yes, yeah.
So if you look at some of the concepts that spin off of that Ehrenberg Bass pool of thought, right? You've got things that go hand in hand with it. Binet and Field, excess share of voice, long, short, everything else like that. Yeah. Excess share of voice, if you look at it on a purely mathematical spectrum, is you'll grow if you can afford to.
Yes.
If you can outspend, you're all good. Happy days, fantastic. But realistically, how can you always outspend? Okay, I'd love to be in a position where that was the case. It's not possible in every situation, yet brands grow. Which tells you that somewhere along the line, there is another factor at play there.
So distinctiveness can't be everything if brands do manage to grow without having a massive pool of money to launch their business in the market.
I mean, you look at the law of double jeopardy from how brands grow, and it basically says that if you're a small brand, you get squashed twice.
Yeah.
People know you less, and you could afford to let them know you less. And I might have that wrong. I might have interpreted that wrong, but from my perspective, you can't. If that argument around distinctiveness and excess share of voice were completely true, we would only have multinationals. Right. That's really, really how I look at that. But in a market like New Zealand, where it's driven, like the backbone of this country is small and medium enterprise, right? Yeah. I just don't believe that pursuing a pure approach of like sole distinctiveness is a pathway that can help a business get to where it needs to.
Right.
And there's another reason why, which is that distinctiveness ostensibly is about looking and sounding like you, right? Yeah. And there are industries where, do you know what, actions actually speak a lot louder than words. Like you take some of the construction industry, for example, and you would have buying groups there who might never be exposed to an ad. They might never hear the jingle, they might not have a clue who your character is, but by reputation, they're the people that you call. Yeah. I don't know, maybe that is a function of distinctiveness, I don't know, but...
Well, it's reputation in relative to competitors that they may have heard of.
Exactly.
So it's relative difference within the category rather than absolute distinctiveness, and you're known by the entire market for being red, or having a mascot or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. You come back to that concept of relative positioning. You are more X than someone is Y, or you're less. And it might be a really, really dull conclusion to take away from this entire debate at the moment, but I think the takeaway is moderation, right? Like,
right. Yeah,
don't worship at the altar of distinctiveness. Yeah. But equally, don't take the mindset that says differentiate or die, because actually, to be honest, on that differentiate or die spectrum, that also doesn't play out. I mean, pursuing a completely unique position. I mean, even if you can find one, you've then got to educate a market about it. You've got to pay to educate a market about it. And by the time you've broken the back of that work, hey, someone else has come along and they've got more cash left in the bank to just come on in and ride on your coattails. So
right, yeah.
For B2B marketers, I really think that it comes down to eating a good diet of differentiation and distinctiveness.
Right, yeah. I love how you unpacked that from a perspective of the New Zealand market in B2B. One key takeaway that I took from from Mark Ritson's webinar is that on both sides of differentiation or distinctiveness, at their various moments in history, each camp has gone a little bit carried away. So on the differentiation side, it started out being presented as a unique selling proposition, and then marketers and brand managers believed they had to be uniquely different, so came up with massive slide decks around what is essentially positioning. We have a brand archetype, your brand purpose, your brand love, all of the different what are essentially positioning. And then on the other side, distinctiveness is throw all of that out, just be red and be known for being whatever distinctive assets that you've chosen to go after. It's not about being different from a competitor, it's just about being known. And so both camps have gotten a little carried away, and what I hear you saying is don't get carried away in either camp. See what works for you, for your business, where you're at in that marketing journey. Both are about positioning, and you might leverage one more than the other at any point in time, but consider both and use them relative to your positioning goals.
Yeah, I mean, like distinctiveness, if you look at it, of course it makes absolute sense in terms of recall. Coming back to the example of me wearing a lobster hat to represent the Crusty Agents Crust Agency earlier on, like if I advertise with the message, need a campaign, call the Crust Agents. Like over time, that becomes very memorable because, I mean, let's face it, how many agencies are selling off the fact that they have a lobster in their name? Like just using that example. But unless you actually back that up with a point of difference, you'll fall over at the boardroom table. So let's say we come to that, we use that example again. That's not going to work. You're not going to convert that sale if you're trying to deal with a corporate, for example. Let's bring the guys in. Oh, they came to mind. They always look like themselves, and we should use them because of that. No, I mean, if you change channels, however, and say, well, what if that business specialized in an area? What if they're the people who are like most attuned to the marine industry, right? I put my Crusty Agents hat back on, and I'm the person that you call if you're in the marine industry or the fishing industry and you need a campaign. Holy shit! Okay, you've come to mind. You're specific, you've got a space that's differentiated, you are more specialized in this than somewhere else, and there is no way you'll lose. Like if you get called into the boardroom in that context, no one's going to touch you.
Right.
Of course, the question then is your market big enough? And of course, in New Zealand, that becomes a real challenge, with fewer people than we have in most US cities as a nationwide population. But I think the debate has raged in a way that is subtractive. Do this at the expense of doing that. But really, I think we should look at it from a more multiplicative lens. If you are distinctive and you've gone through that exercise, like we've done last week with the distinctive assets grid, and you've got a really, really clear idea of, okay, well, these are the select few brand assets and codes that we need the market to just know verbatim.
Yeah.
We've tied that to a buying situation. We've tied it to a category entry point. If we've done that to get the call, get invited into the boardroom, and you've got the differentiation and substance to go with it, that lets that protagonist who's brought you in the B2B context. It could be the procurement person, whoever it is, so long as you've got that differentiation that lets them justify and defend across the table why they were right to do that and why they were right to get the quote and why spending an extra 20% with you is the right choice, that feels to me like a much more rounded, logical approach to actually kind of like picking this whole thing apart. The idea that you could saturate a boardroom with absolute brand awareness based on distinctiveness in a way that justifies spending company money, I actually don't buy it. I don't.
Shall we for a moment turn, I don't know if you want to go down this route, but turn the discussion on ourselves. We have a distinctive baby, and we are Blue Ocean, the B2B agency. So there's some level of distinctiveness there, and difference being we're specializing in B2B. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one because we've been quite conscious about some of the codes that we play in terms of the distinctive assets grid. So we have a very tight suite of codes that we use in all of our communications, from advertising to presentation. But they're not necessarily the thing that get us across the line. The fact that we are positioned as more specialist in B2B is the thing that takes people into a conversation with us, kind of saying, okay, well, actually I kind of want you on my team, because no one else knows the space or is saying that they know the space as well as you. It's not to say that we're not taking the position of being like the only marketing agency in APAC that does B2B advertising campaigns for software as a service. We're not staking that claim, and we're not claiming that we're doing anything unique. We're just, you know what, we know more about B2B because it's what we live and breathe. It's our bread and butter.
Right. Cool.
So I think, again, if you take that multiplicative view, it makes rational sense. You know, if we've done that advertising piece, we've come to mind, we've put a stake in the ground that says we stand for more specialist in B2B. It's very easy for someone to then justify, when they've got their 3 quotes, when they've done their due diligence piece, when they've tackled those other great big Ds of differentiation and distinctiveness, they've done that piece. It's so much easier for them to say, yeah, but these guys know B2B.
Right. Yes.
You know, like rather than, oh, they're a great agency and they know this isn't. They know our space. They know our space better than these guys. These guys are fantastically creative, but they don't know B2B.
Yeah.
So when it comes to making decisions around how you skin this cat from a B2B perspective, I think that's the most important thing for me. Is there's been this shift of mindset in business to business marketing and business to business advertising just across the board that says, okay, start dealing with humans. Okay, just treat people as the humans that they are, not the robots that we thought they were in terms of spending with other people's money. Yeah. So become more creative, go in this skew, go in this direction. Be edgy, be dangerous, do all of that stuff, appeal to the heart. And that's all valid. And it's all very, very valid. And it makes a big difference in terms of getting through the door, the recall piece. But then when it comes to building trust, convincing the person that signs off on the spend, differentiation still has such a big role to play. And I don't know if I've covered this before in topics that we've spoken about, but I have this firm belief that the art in B2B is about understanding both the head and the heart. So making sure that you've got that emotional hook, that you've built memorability, that you're easy to bring to mind, that you inspire an emotion in the person who's driving a sale. But you've got to then have substance, and you've got to be able to appeal to the head, because at some point in time, someone's got to compare 2 things or 3 things, as is the standard here, and say, we need to choose these guys because.
Right.
And I don't believe that a logo, a character, or a jingle is going to be something that manages to, secure a sale of $2 million worth of cement.
Right, yeah. So what I hear you saying is we need to modify this debate for the B2B market in New Zealand. If you're a marketer in a business-to-business company, you should be leveraging both. Perhaps distinctiveness can get you through the door, but differentiation will get you across the line. But also, if businesses can grow without much distinctiveness at all, the differentiation can carry them until they reach a certain size, and then distinctiveness can carry them further in terms of market penetration. But that differentiation will always play a role when you've got 3 quotes on the table and you've got more than one decision maker that will help you make that sale.
As you've been talking about that, I love, again, just reframing the through the door piece. And if we look at like that typical traditional view of a business-to-business organization, which is where all the people who sign off on the big decisions are on the top floor, let's coin a little phrase that distinctiveness gets you through the door, differentiation gets you up the floors. Like it gets you all the way to the top, and it helps someone sell and sell and sell you all the way up through the buying group to the point that, someone who may not have that same emotional tie to your business or your brand, and who is perhaps making a more factual decision, has got the ammunition to say, these guys, this is who I'm choosing.
Right. Yeah.
Through the door, up the floors.
That's
I like
great.
that. Cool.
I really like that. One thing that we've learned over time is that many business-to-business companies think of themselves as quite rational thinkers. We know that humans are not always rational. We make choices based on irrational reasons that we're not even aware of. And distinctiveness helps us win that battle of emotion and that irrational thinking that happens when you're considering businesses to do business with, or brands to do business with. And so it can bypass that rational thinking to begin with, but at some point rational thinking is going to play a massive part.
You have to eat your greens at some point.
You have to eat your greens. So I have a friend who's a civil engineer, and he claims to me that they, in their office, they are not at all emotional. That they all make rational decisions all of the time. And yet, as he explains the culture of the business, you can clearly see there are some emotions at play. So when you're at work and when you have to make decisions about which supplier to go with, or hiring, or all of that that goes on within a business, because it's your job, and your job pays for your mortgage and puts food on the table. Your work is an inherently emotional thing, even if you're praised for being very rational in your decision making in your actual work. So whether you're in B2B or B2C, distinctiveness can play a part in that, getting through the door, getting top of mind based on emotional, the way our brains work emotionally. And then if it's just that, you'll fall over in industries where they are praised themselves for being highly, highly rational and critical thinkers. So you also need to play that differentiation piece, which highlights the differences from a rational perspective between you and your competitors, and why it's more of a rational choice to go with you than someone else.
I think it's a really good example, because at the end of the day, gut feel still counts for a huge amount, right? If I look at CRM choices, we'll come back to this one because, let's face it, it's a space that everyone knows. I feel comfortable saying HubSpot's going to work. I know it. I perceive it everywhere. It's been such a part of modern marketing thinking around inbound and the framework that goes with that. It's very easy to feel like it's the right choice.
Yep.
But it's the differentiation piece that helps you rationalize that decision to yourself, that says, well, I feel like it's the right choice, but it's definitely good for SME. It's that differentiation piece, it's that meaningful difference that actually lets you rationalize an emotional decision, which is why I think you need both halves of the coin, and you need to play them where you can, probably in equal weight, to be honest. And I don't have any numbers to back that up. Don't get me wrong. I haven't done we haven't done any longitudinal studies about what that needs to look like. But it comes down to having the right diet and making sure that you are building the emotional piece, but then you're also giving people a way of defending it.
Okay. So from here, from a marketing perspective, what would your very quickly, what would your key takeaways be for any marketer in New Zealand operating within the B2B space?
First and foremost, don't make any decisions just by listening to this podcast. I mean, let's be realistic here. There's a school of thought. Go and dig into it. Go and read how brands grow, and go and read the second one, and go and take a deep dive in the opposite direction and kind of see what that looks like. But also just apply some logic. I mean, at the end of the day, dogma has never helped anyone make good decisions. And if all that you do is, I'm a Ritsonite, don't get me wrong, I love Ritson, but at the same time, Byron Sharp and Jenny Romanchuk have shaped the way that we work with clients and that I work with clients and that I approach marketing. Yeah. There's fantastic stuff here, there's fantastic stuff. Go and do the reading, dig around the subject, and play, to be honest. I mean, at the end of the day, that's part of this, right? I mean, you've got to go and work out the right mix for yourself. And if you're in an industry, for example, where no one sees advertising, then, hey, all of a sudden you've got some food for thought, right? Yeah. How do you then build distinctiveness if no one's seeing your ads? So I think the approach is, go and build yourself a good balanced diet of marketing theory. Yeah. And recognize that B2B still is distinct from B2C. Yeah. You've still got to appeal to the head, you've got to appeal to the heart. Distinctiveness will get you through the door, and differentiation will send you through the floors.
Well, thank you very much for that perspective, Dale. What I hear you saying is that don't sit in one camp or the other. Check yourself as soon as you start feeling like, oh, I'm going to get on this bandwagon. Stop, think, contextualize what you're reading to your particular business and market, and find a way forward, and it will usually involve some sort of balance.
Yeah, you can't live off steak.
Right. As much as iron is good for you, and if you have an iron deficiency,
go for gold. But
don't throw out your vegetables and.
Yeah, exactly. Still eat your greens and have some carbs. It's exactly the same. It's exactly the same. I think that's a good place to end.
Thank you very much, Dale. That's a lot for me to think about as a creative, as a designer thinking about marketing.
Yeah, and we should probably wrap this up with a little bit that says, if you're a listener and you're involved in this trade-off, check in, join the conversation, pop notes in, pop comments in. Equally, if you want to come and sit where I'm sitting or where Shannon's sitting and come and extend this debate by being part of the show, by being part of the podcast, shoot us a message, start a conversation, and let's just continue to grow the B2B community here in New Zealand.